Hi, I'm Gravity.
I'm Renee.
And we have a new resource out with Stenhouse called Teacher's Toolkit for Independent Reading. And it got us thinking about how independent reading has evolved. So this is my 20th year as a teacher, just over 20 years for you. And I was thinking about when I first started teaching, the big thing was drop everything and read. And it was a big deal that we actually gave kids time in class to read, especially to read something that was self-selected by them. And so that part was fabulous, and I'm glad we've kept that. But I was thinking back about what I used to do during that time. And to be honest, I had no idea what to do, so I often just aimlessly walked around the room making sure kids were reading, or I sat there and read too. And while there's probably nothing wrong with walking around the room and making eye contact with kids and making sure they're reading and reading myself, when I think back about it, there was a lot of instructional opportunities and coaching opportunities that were missed. So let's think about what is independent reading today then.
Yeah. I was just thinking something quickly before that.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking, I'm wondering too, the why of drop everything and read is perhaps because, the idea of reading independently in schools was new.
Yeah.
So students just needed this model, even though they may have been read to at home or not, but they just needed this model of moving away from we're all kind of going through the same text together in more of an anthology or a basal to having my own book. And so it made sense at that time that they needed to have the teacher in the room being the model.
Yeah. And when I look back, the moments of me sort of walking around not really sure what to do, I noticed there were kids who had been on the same page for 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, I think that book might be too hard for them. And I also noticed kids who were hysterical laughing at a book, and I was dying to know what's so funny. My urge was I wanted to go talk to them and I wanted to find out what was going on, but I also didn't know was that okay? So it's interesting to think about the evolution of how now, whether we use reading workshop or a guided reading model, or if your district calls it something else, that we now know independent reading can be instructional and conversational. So I think about so much of how once we've moved away from drop everything and read and we have this reading time, we now know we can sit side by side with students. But then I think the next challenge was what do I say? Okay, so I'm hey, tell me about your book. And sometimes that would go great, and sometimes I would just hear long summaries of retelling of books. And at a certain point, I was oh my gosh, I don't need a page-by-page explanation. Or kids would sort of just look at me and be stop interrupting me, I just want to read.
Yeah, that was a little bit of my experience. My first teaching experience was in a school that already had a strong workshop, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I saw my colleagues sitting beside kids, so I sat beside them, and I smiled. And I wasn't really sure what to say. I actually wrote some things down. I just started taking transcripts. But thankfully, I was able to get some support and really the kind of the power of conferring, of really making it an instructional opportunity. And by the way, an instructional opportunity that increases transfer by a ton. Because you've got that one-on-one support, not dismissing whole group teaching, but really knowing that whole group teaching is kind of almost like a guide, and your one-on-one is really where students can really receive your teaching. And we'll go back a little bit because you're really teaching to what they need and what they're working on.
Definitely. And honestly, it's where I got to know students as people, as readers. I learned from students. And so I hope that teachers have a time in their day, every teacher, every grade level, where kids actually independently read. And I think what the toolkit offers is what's our role as teachers, and how do we make the most of these converting conversations that doesn't feel like an interruption to a student, but a gift that they have a fellow reader who's going to talk to them and help them grow. And also doesn't just lead to long retells where we're sort of bored out of our mind, but we all grow as a result of the conversation.
It feels like one tool that I think I wish I would have had in the classroom, but now we have, is just how we can start conferences to open up, invite students to think out loud, just to be present. And what's so incredible about that is that we can see their brilliance, right? Kids can show us how brilliant they are in so many ways in that one-on-one and creating that safe space, that it's hard to actually end the conference.
Yes.
But it almost, I'm not going to say easy, but it really kind of, they are able, through that conversation, I think we're able to hear
Yeah.
how we can support them.
Yeah. And in my experience, there's this like point, and for some kids it's right away, and some kids it takes months, where like they end up being able to tell me exactly like where they need to go next. And so in a way, like the conference is like helpful for them, but it's also so helpful for me because they don't always say it in standard speak, right? I've never had a kid say, I need more help on that reading literature standard 9 right now. But they'll often say, I don't know what reading language standard 9 is off the top of my head, but they will say something like, I'm noticing like these two characters, whenever they come together, like something bad happens, and I'm starting to notice that pattern. So like they're tracking character relationships, they're like interested in conflicts, right? So much of it is like listening with that curiosity to see like they will show us where to go next. And then it's my job as a reader to share like, well, how do I do that? And how do other readers do that? So when you said like you wish you had, when I look back at my early days of conferring, I did a lot of telling and not a lot of actually like opening up my reading life and showing kids. So I didn't really have books in my hands. I didn't really have notebooks. And so now I can't imagine conferring without a book and a notebook in my hand, because that's when I actually can show kids, here's something that I do.